Hi everyone, this is Gregg and Mira, or Mira and Gregg, and today we are discussing something that is quite relevant, but unfortunately, as surprisingly, has not been discussed so much, which is a gender perspective of the war in Ukraine, and specifically focusing on the forced conscription of men and the fact that women were mostly not allowed to fight, and they were ascribed with the idea of protecting their families. So me being someone who loved gender studies and Greg being an expert on military issues, an extra expert. So we think that this is a topic that we can cover comfortably, even if it's not really an easy topic. Greg.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic, honestly. I think that we're going to have a lot of agreement here and not as much disagreement as we typically would when we discuss things. And I have to make some blanket claims that I see things from different perspectives just like everybody else does. I see an idealistic world, I see a realistic world, and this particular topic challenges me because my realistic side, my pro-military side, wants a strong, lethal military that is excluded from the difficulties that happen within cultures and societies. But the good-hearted part of me sees, maybe I'm both sides are good-hearted, but the other side of me sees this particular conflict as something that we want to try to figure out as well as possible without being so hard on society. I don't know exactly how to express how I would define it, but let's just get into the topic and see what comes out of it.
Yep. The first, do you want me to start with one of the first issues, or you'll go on?
Well, I can jump in just a little bit more. So
Yeah.
a lot of this is based on an article by Yuricho Mori, and in her opening introduction, she specifies that on February 24th, Russia, led by President Vladimir Putin, launched an invasion on Ukraine. On the same day, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky declared martial law and a general order or general mobilization, and he prohibited male citizens 18 to 60 to leave the country. At the same time, women, children, old people, somebody with an excuse, somebody with political ties, everybody else other than the poor and uneducated men were allowed to leave the country and seek their own personal safety. And men, not so much. So I think that sounds a bit like the standard world that we live in that abuses men, not to sound overly dramatic, that doesn't take men as seriously within the realm of society based on some idea that men are better at combat. And while that might be true, I don't think that should exclude them from the rights and freedoms that every human should have.
I agree. As you said, we mostly agree, I think, on this topic. But I don't know if I should use abuse of men in general, like in society, because I think that, as you know, I think that we live in a patriarchal society that has ascribed some different roles and is abusing both men and women, and by putting men in some kind of higher position, because they are stronger, they are the protector, they are the defenders, the protectors, the defenders. And I think that what happened and what is happening still in Ukraine, it's the typical case of these very patriarchal and unequal society, or gender unequal, because, and it's like, and this is what really bothers me, because Ukraine, in the general context, Ukraine is the victim of this aggression. But on the other side, I cannot allow myself to not criticize these gender aspects of the war, where they just reinforced, like strongly reinforced, the gender inequalities in the society, considering that all men, they have to protect the country, and women, maybe they just have to care for the elders and for children, and as if men cannot do it. And on the other side, what I really find an abuse is the fact that you are violating the rights of many men, to move, not allowing them to leave the country. I think that they even included another violation in, if I'm not wrong, please correct me, in summer 2024 by ordering all the consular services to not provide services to men in other countries because they are not going back to Ukraine to fight. So
Yeah. That's just the government's most recent attempt to use force to have their way, which, I'm going to say this nonstop. I see both sides of this. I understand the idea of a conscripted army, but I think the logic falls apart in a few places. So let's define terms real quick. But before that, I'm going to go back to your patriarchal argument. You bring that up all the time, and I think it's half baked.
Patriarchal, yeah.
It's
Please.
entirely complete, because if all these governments that have this so-called patriotic society, government, whatever you want to call it, and they're only men within those ranks, well, then I guess that definition makes sense. But once you have even a portion of women that are part of the government, and they're still making those decisions, is it really a patriotic system at that point, or is it just some form of authoritarianism? So just something to think about. I don't think we need to go too deep into the definition of the patriotic system, but from my perspective, the patriotic system starts with a man and a woman and their exploitation of others, typically men. But let's move on, unless you have something else to say. So what we're talking about, the difference between a professional military and a conscripted military. And right now in Ukraine and many other places, conscription is the policy of forcing citizens to join the military ranks for the benefit of the nation on a whole. And it's mandatory, it's mandated. Just like the draft in the United States during the Vietnam War, it was mandated. And some of the first issues I see is, first off, I don't mind being part of a professional military organization, and I would mind being conscribed. And the issue or the difference would be, if I was there to fight the fight and I truly believed in it, I don't need to be conscribed. I'm conscribing myself. I'm volunteering to go and become that professional military unit. And by definition, when you force people to do things, they're not going to do them well. Would I want to go into battle with somebody that's forced to be there? No, because at that point I'm trying to protect myself from the enemy as well as that individual. If he's not willing to be there to protect me, then he's likely there willing to hurt me just as easily as he wants to hurt anybody else that he has an opportunity to do so. And again, the conscribed, where do these conscribed people come from? Typically they are poor, unintelligent, I'm sorry to have to say it that way, uneducated, and you would typically hear that as like the poor tax. Well, I call it a low intelligence tax. You can include that in there because it's unfortunate that not everybody is a genius, but that is the case. That doesn't mean those people's lives are of less value. That's absolutely not the case. So if I want to be in a professional military, I want them to be people that are there on their own accord, doing the work for their country that they believe they should do, and they're doing it in a professional manner, and they're doing it with the intent of having a positive outcome and not necessarily being forced to be there or being just bad at their job. And that's typically what you're going to find with a conscripted military, especially if they're brought in last minute. I mean, if you have a policy of conscription, like some of the countries like Norway or
Denmark.
The Denmarks of the world, where they conscribe you for a couple of years, gives you appreciation of what the military does. It gives you a sense of paying back your country, but not necessarily just, hey, there's a war happening, we didn't prepare for it, and now you're going to be the payment, which is our failure to plan. So I think there's a huge difference between professional militaries, and I think there's a lot of detriment to having conscription other than just emptying your prisons. It doesn't seem like it's the most advantageous way to fight a war. And that's not even discussing the idea of gender, which I'm sure you're going to break into very soon.
I mean, that's a really nice transition to what I wanted to say, because in fact, while what happened, so this forced recruitment or conscription violated the right of man to leave the country, on the other side, it violated the right of women to fight for their country. And I suppose that between a young man or a man, I mean, that doesn't want to fight for all the reasons in the world, and a woman who is willing to fight. I mean, I don't know, what do you think, like, with whom would you feel like safer? I think with a woman that is willing to fight because she has some ideal and she is really willing to like take the gun and go there and fight. And I think that that was another issue, like not allowing women to fight, and also approaching them or calling them, just calling all those who are nurses or doctors or dentists. So again, putting them on this kind of a caring role, like not the fighters, but just those who have to deal with caring for soldiers, which is a fantastic role and a very important one. But why still you are putting women in this caregiver role and not to the one that they might be really competent to? So this kind of violation of the right of women to fight and to go there voluntarily, I think that again it's included in on this gender perspective. And we have this society that is again reinforcing the fact that men are the protectors and women are those who just have to care about the rest of the family. So what is going on with these women and with these families? In the sense they are left completely on their own. Nobody is talking about them. So on the other side, we have so many sudden organizations that are being built for groups of people, mostly of women, because they are not allowed to go and fight. What they are doing now, they are helping people to survive and to live. But this is, again, something that we're not talking so much about. And I mean mostly on the official discourse of the Ukrainian politicians, because most of their rhetoric discourse, please correct me
Rhetoric.
if I'm okay. So it's built on these heroes of the nation and also on the stigmatization of those that are leaving the country, which are considered as the traitors, etc., etc. And if I'm not wrong, there is quite a huge number of men that are leaving the country, again, under illegally. And I'm going back to the question that I made in the beginning. So is this successful? But when I see some statistics that, and it was an official of the border control in Ukraine that it was saying that it's the average, it's like 10 men per day that try to leave the country,
Trying to leave the
which
country.
means, yeah. So it means that there is something like really not right here. So it's not working, this forced conscription. And if these people are willing to leave, of course, you can strengthen again by, as I said, not allowing consular services, etc., etc. They will try and find the ways to leave. So you have to find other ways, maybe allowing women to fight in order to strengthen army ranks.
Yeah. So first off, I don't think the fact that just because several men, 10 a day, are trying to leave the country, from that you conclude that conscription's not working. Because conscription, it works as long as you have people that are just going into the conflict, and they don't need to be necessarily well trained. They don't need to be necessarily good at their job. They just need to be targets out there on the battlefield, and they
Just to be killed?
just to be killed. That's the core tenets behind conscription, in my opinion, because you're not looking to have the perfect soldier. You're just looking to have soldiers, and you spread them out, and they become targets, and maybe you take away targeting the civilian population by having military in the field, regardless if they're good military or not. So just arguing that men are trying to leave, that doesn't mean conscription doesn't work. Now, is it a good fit? Is it a good fix? I would say no. I think there are so many holes in the idea of conscriptionism, if that's a word, that the practice isn't necessarily the metric of success doesn't mean that you have a great deal of battlefield victories. The metrics of success is that you have a body of force. You have men and women, whatever you want to call them, out in the field. They are out there to do something, not necessarily to be the best possible soldiers. But I want to jump into something a little bit different. As I was thinking through this topic, I started thinking about Milton Friedman, the economist, and he started talking about the United States and how people move from county to county to state as a part of the democratic process. If you have a local government that is not spending your taxes correctly or not producing governmental work in a manner that you like, you can leave that city and go to another city. That is the raw power of democracy. If you have less people in a city and the city starts to fold, the politicians of that city, they're likely to do things to improve it, to draw more people in, to have a larger population. That is one of the quintessential powers of democracy, that you have a choice to live where you want to live. Now, it seems peculiar to me that, and we're not claiming Ukraine to be the perfect democracy, but it seems to me that if you have the democracy to vote for your leadership and your government, and you're finding that your government is failing you, leaving the country to find a better government is what democracy is all about. And just because the government has failed to do their job securing you or to make peace with even nations that are trying to take over your lands, at some point, your right of democracy, your human rights, if you want to go that direction, lets you leave that conflict zone. You shouldn't be forced to fight for something that you don't believe in. The effects are going to be horrible, and it's a failure of human rights.
What you said now, like the not the last sentence, but the before, it's what I was meaning previously with the forced conscription. So if they are willing to leave, even like illegally or through illegal ways, it means that really something has failed and they don't want to fight for this country. On the other side, and I agree with you that this is a human right, like to move freely. If I could go there, that would be kind of complicated because freedom of movement is something that it's being put so much at risk now, not only in Ukraine but everywhere. Milton Friedman, it's not really my favorite economist as a left-wing person that I am. The problem is that I am free to leave my country, but I am not free to enter to another country. So there is a huge contradiction there in nowadays world. So
Democratically speaking, a country should have the right to look at people that want to come to their country and decide if they want them to come in and provide their vote.
Yeah. So then where is my freedom of movement? So there is a huge paradox there. I'm talking about this from the perspective of a migrant since my 18 years old. So I'm kind of used to it, to juggle between this having and not having the freedom, which is a huge topic also in the case of Ukraine. But I also wanted to say something that we discussed during our first episode: transgenders in the military. And again, in the case of Ukraine, and I'm not sure if it was mentioned in the article that you cited before or in one of the others, but there has been also this huge case. Huge in the sense of not of the numbers, but of its symbolic, that transgender men were not allowed to fight because in their passport it's mentioned that they are women. And also transgender women were not allowed to leave because in their passports is mentioned that they are men. So this is another point, as I said, not because of the numbers, but because of its symbolic. This is another topic related to gender, together with the one of women not being allowed to fight. But I'd really like to see your point of view about women fighting.
Oh, wow. It's changed a great deal. And it's changed hopefully for good reason, but I doubt that's the case. I remember when I was 18 years old and I was told that if I don't go and do some paperwork to sign up for selective service, the American lottery for the draft, if you will, that I'll go to jail. No women is offered that wonderful option, and I sarcastically comment that way because at the time I thought, if a war ever happened, and this is before I was a professional soldier, if a war ever happened, the first thing I would do would go to court and say, okay, I want all these women to go to war too, because what's that going to do? That's going to increase my likelihood of survival. From an individual perspective, more people into the fray means maybe I'll get out, better. And in a way, I still agree with that. I think that a nation has to put forth all of its resources, and that does the nation good, and that also does me good as an individual too. So I still think that. I revised some of my thoughts on that after understanding certain truths that do exist. Men are typically stronger, more aggressive, and I would even say more prone to being brainwashed into going to war, where women probably were a lot more sensible. You tell a young 18-year-old kid, hey, we're going to go over there and fight those people, likely he'll be ecstatic to do so, because of the social pressures that are put on men through the entirety of their being raised. And women, while there are some who might find themselves reacting the exact same way, in general, I think, are likely to be opposed to go just arbitrarily fighting somebody over there just because somebody said to do so. And that's a weakness in men, especially young men, that they're so easily coerced into doing violence against others. So that being said, my perspective of the military had changed in that respect. And I still see that there's a time and place for military. You have to protect your family, you have to protect your neighbors, you have to protect those that are dedicated to live the life you've decided to live, regardless if you started off thinking that or not. So you do need to have a capable military. So I wholeheartedly support that as well. But the idea that you're forcing people to fight, as we were talking about earlier, that changes the entire calculus of the situation. You have to have people motivated and having a true belief for the cause that they fight for. Otherwise, you're going to find more catastrophe than you are military success. So from there,
Why?
go ahead. I'd like a break. Go ahead.
No, no, you were saying, and that was really interesting, about an 18 years old young man and young woman, and so the young man would be easily coerced. Why do you think it is? Do you think it's related to the fact that we socialize or we shape? I mean, I'm saying socialize from a more sociologistic point of view, but like we shape men and women differently, and men to show their manhood by being aggressive and
It's an
fighting.
echo chamber of reality. Men are immature and men are aggressive. And society sees that and it awards it in a lot of occasions.
Who said it? Who said that are immature and aggressive?
Comparatively speaking, if you look at it, this is my observations, I'm not a sociologist. If I look at an 18-year-old boy and an 18-year-old girl, I'm going to make certain assessments about the 18-year-old boy and the activities he's going to take, just like a car insurance company does. There's a reason you turn 16 as a boy, your car insurance costs, 3 times as much as it costs as a woman or a girl. Because boys, that immaturity is going to show. As soon as they get behind the wheel, they want to speed around, and do things that aren't necessarily safe to do in a vehicle. And vehicles are designed for transportation, even though we all get a great deal of pleasure out of them. Where a woman or a girl, is going to have a far different experience with the first time behind the wheel. I think generally she's going to be more cautious and more understanding that a vehicle is used as a tool and not just as an entertainment device. So that analogy can be spread across the genders pretty far, regardless if they're trans or not. Men, when they're younger, are far more childish.
Maybe because we put more pressure on young girls to be more mature.
Well, that's part of the social echo chamber I'm talking about. You know,
Yeah.
it's natural in the first place, and society recognizes it and then regurgitates it right back into young people to where it's a continuous cyclic system of, you know, a man's supposed to act this way, they do act a certain way, therefore a man's supposed to act this way. It's circular logic, but it works out.
So we could change it. I mean, I'm just looking for
Sure.
ways to change it. Okay.
Yeah,
So we
absolutely.
agree on
Society
that.
can be changed. The question is, you know, how is it going to be changed? Should it be changed? Who can change it? To what level? I mean, natural is natural. What happens naturally, you know, is you know, we've already changed society. We have laws. You're not allowed to go beat
No,
people up. You
we
can't
have to
beat people up.
change again society. It's not that we have laws. This society, it's not right. It's not just. So we have to change it.
Okay.
Okay,
I
go
mean,
on.
if
Sorry.
we can figure out a way to not have wars, you know, in this stage of my life, I look at, you know, negotiation over violence, you know, as the first way to resolve conflict. It took me a long time to get to that, you know, resolution. When I was young, I wanted to be just as violent as every other person, every other man, I suppose. So
Don't think that women are not violent if they have to.
I know that some of them are, but you know, I look at statistics as well and stereotypes and all those valuable tools. And women just aren't, by large numbers, more aggressive and more violent. Women are a lot more negotiating and pragmatic and appreciative of the qualities of humans that men don't always hold. Regardless, we're talking about the conscription in Ukraine and whether it's right or wrong. I honestly think I think my opinion is pretty obvious. I think it's you, conscription requires a couple of things. It requires that the government takes away virtually all of your rights. You don't have the right of free speech. You don't have the right of freedom of movement, as you indicated. You have no rights over yourself, and if it's all based on the fact that you're born with a penis, that seemed to be very arbitrary, and regardless of the strengths of being able to control weak men, um, it's very, my favorite word, adolescent in how a government and a society should work. It's just,
Um, I mean, I'll keep this as a note because I would like that just to repeat it on the other topics that we will have in order to emphasize that being born with a vagina doesn't mean that you have to endure X, Y, Y, Z. So yeah. But again, on the case of Ukraine and the conscription of men, there was something else that I want to look how men and women are suffering or being impacted by what's going on. There have been so many cases of violence against women, not against women soldiers, by their peers or by the enemy, but violence against women in the cities where there is no conflict. But because there are no men, there are just old age persons and children and women and apparently some men. And institutions are not taking care of these issues because we're under attack. So we have this huge issue now, which is the conflict with Russia. So we're not going to deal with these small things. And this again goes to what I was saying in the beginning. So because we think society in these ways, like men doing these brave things and women doing all the caregiving, which is not really so important. We have now all these situations of women being sexually aggressed. And so, I mean, I'm smiling because I'm very uncomfortable with these issues that I've been working so many years. And another thing is that some of these women were saying that they are being judged or evaluated like more than men. And I would really like your opinion on this and also on another thing, which is sexual harassment against women in the army by their peers. Yeah, you
yeah.
say their peers? Yeah.
You know,
So, do you think it's true that they are?
absolutely. You know, and I can even put myself in their place. If I was a common soldier placed in a military unit, and society, your best friend, told me that I have all these men with me, and then there's women that are generally weaker than other men, I would find that to mean that I'm more likely to be killed in conflict. So I can see an apprehension about having women, participating in the exact same combat that other men would. But you can make that same argument towards, what's considered weaker men or unmanly men. There are unmanly men who would be just as troubled to be in the middle of conflict as men that are more attuned to it. Maybe the men that are more attuned to it, myself included, are less evolved or something to that respect. There's a difference within people, and it transcends gender. Just like there can be a group of aggressive women that would scare the hell out of me. They would be the right group to go to war. So yeah, there's going to be men, which, typically in a military situation, they're going to have a great deal more numbers. So there's going to have some situations where a large number of men are going to identify the weaker individuals, be them other men or a group of women, and make the argument that those people make them less safe or they're not as effective on the battlefield. So I can see how for right or wrong, a standard will be developed, and it will be expected that everybody meets that certain standard of aggression and, soldiering and followership. And I can see women being in the minority taking the brunt of that abuse. And if the idea is that we need every citizen to fight, then women should be brought into the fold, and every effort should be made to make sure that they are as an effective combatant as possible. Maybe this is just off the cuff, maybe there should be an entire female unit of the military where they don't have to compete against other men, they're just competing against other women. And maybe we'll find some new discovery about warfare with an all-female unit. I mean, I know that's kind of a preposterous way to fix this issue, but you can't just complain that women are going to be abused and that's the reason they can't go to war. Because let's face it, just because men don't complain about the abuses of their lives day and night, and men are abused just as readily on the day-to-day basis of every other man or women, that doesn't give them a right to not follow through with defending their country if they choose to do so.
Yes, I mean, I don't know if we will have time for you to go back to the unmanly man, because I think that this is a great expression, and I think that it kind of englobes most of gender studies there. But maybe we will just dedicate a specific episode on masculinity and how it is constructed, and that I love that. So but this thing of putting women into more detailed like evaluation, etc., it's not only in the army, it's everywhere in those areas where it's considered as a man's job. For example, being a member of parliament, and I don't think that being a member of parliament requires any manhood in the sense of physical strength. But for a woman to be a member of parliament in a specific country, in most of the countries, as it happens, it's like, oh, is she capable of doing that? I mean, why aren't you saying this for men? Are they capable of doing that? So what is it? Is it taken for granted that a man could be a member of parliament or a minister or a politician? But okay, we are talking about...
Well,
I know that you want to react. Go on.
I think that's a mistaken understanding. First off, I think that there are anecdotal stories of women having to be more aggressive than the men counterparts in order to be accepted. I've seen that before. I've heard of that before. But the idea that other men aren't berating every other man is a fallacy. So yes, you can have men saying, "Hey, should she be here? Does she have what it takes to be here?" But guess what? Every other man is facing that exact same criticism. So that's not just, for women to have and hold for their own. That's just not the case. Men are also evaluated, as you would put it, nonstop all day long. It's just the case that men are more used to it. Maybe we need women to be evaluated heavily. So in general, they participate more in tune with the established, men organization until it evolves into a men-woman organization. Does that make any sense? If men are held to the
No.
hard standard that they have been and they're put in that position, just because a woman is held to a hard standard in that position doesn't mean it's just for her. Everybody in that situation, theoretically, could be held to a hard standard.
That would be fantastic. This is what I would like. And I think that most of the feminists, they would like that. The problem
Well, I'm
is that
saying
in
that might
some
be the case
areas,
already. I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm saying
no,
that might be the case already. You just are falling into the victimhood category sometimes.
no. I just hate that victimhood category because, I see agency in all, even in some women that is just thinking that things are not right. Even if she's not doing anything, but just thinking, being conscious about things not being right. For me, there is agency there and she's not a victim. So I try to not victimize men or women, but mostly women because, women's rights are mostly violated most.
I think it's a bit self-defeatist, but that's okay.
No. These are, you like statistics, so these are based on statistics, and let me bring all these statistics to you next time. I was referring just to politics and to being a member of parliament, which I said it doesn't require any strength. And I could bring you so many examples of how women are, how do you say it, puts, or the pressure of being of high standards. It's like, it's huge, but that's not for men.
That's
So
entirely
no, that's
men.
entirely
My
true.
argument: men are put under just as many. They're evaluated just as hard as women are.
Come on.
Come on.
No,
Let's
that's
let's
not
let's get
true.
back in. Let's get
Let's
back
go
into
back to Ukraine. Yeah, because
yeah.
this is like the
So
most important,
I look at
I
this
mean, the topic of
conscription.
the day.
I look at this conscription argument, and it falls through for me for so many reasons. First off, I did a quick search. What industries have stopped in Ukraine during the conflict? None. That means there's still bakers, they're not car manufacturers, but there's still people broadcasting. They're still making cartoons. They're still making TV shows. Albeit a lot of them about Russia, and they're basically researching as they go. But if the war is so dire that you have to concentrate on capturing just the men to go fight it, why aren't we taking all these other industries and pushing them into the fold? Because the argument is that in order to save your society or your nation, what we should say, that these men and only men need to go sacrifice themselves. And there are so many exceptions given not to participate. If you are a man and your job is a man or woman, excuse me, and it's your job to make a TV show or a cartoon, I don't understand why you're not immediately pulled into the fight as well. Because it's so blatantly arbitrary just to have man go fight, as opposed to lawyer go fight. Why are all these senior generals of the Ukrainian military, why aren't they on the front lines? Because they want to exploit the lower classes, just like every
Yeah.
other country does. And every other country, you see it. NATO puts out, excuse my calling out NATO, they put out these academic pieces of literature that argues that men should be providing their service to their nation. And it seems so unfair and wrong. And I'm thinking, why is NATO doing that? NATO's doing that, unfortunately, because they're making sure that their countries don't lose the power they have to push men to war when they need them to do so. So they just adjust, or they accept that, hey, Ukraine is doing this, and it's rightfully so, because if we were at war, we would do the same thing. We would force our men to go out there and fight. And I find that to be, it seems like men have no place in society other than as tools of destruction. And I know men, the majority of men are great authors and politicians and whatnot. But you have all these people that are in these educated fields. If it was up to me, I would be putting every lawyer on the battlefield far before I just indiscriminately put every man on the battlefield. Lawyers are smart. They're educated. And if you're so smart, you'll be good on the battlefield. Why put some uneducated, unintelligent, poor kid on the battlefield before these professional people? Why? Because, well, you know why.
I might say that you're having some left-wing ideas there
Watch
regarding all this class,
you watch
regarding all
your mouth, Mira. I will hang up this
class,
call right now.
this class analysis. No, I think that's, yeah, I think that going back to the conscription thing, first of all, it should be to all women and men, and not this forced conscription, but mostly a voluntary thing if they wanted it to not violate the human rights of their citizens, and also to promote women's participation not only in the war but also in peace building. And I will link it to what you were saying about NATO, because normally NATO and also some other institutions, they are obliged to implement this UN resolution on women, peace and security, the resolution 1325, that is pushing toward the participation of women in the military forces, armed forces, but also in the police, but also on the peace building dialogue. Because I would also think about one thing. There has been no woman. I mean, okay, there have not been so many peace dialogue moments regarding Ukraine and Russia conflict, but there was not even one woman. So I think that this idea of associating war just to man, on the other side, it associates also peace, if I could call it like this, or the after war only to man. So women are completely excluded from this area, which is so important.
I think it's important, but
Again,
I also have a very cynical, idea. I think that wars continue because as a society, as humans, we devalue the lives of men. That's my thesis. And my hypothetical would be this. It's already been proven that you can have, hundreds of thousands of men die and the war goes on, the world goes on. And society says, okay, that's the way it was, a bunch of men died, and let's move on from there. I suggest that war would be over a great deal sooner if it was embodied by women. I think that if the world had to sit back and look at a battlefield that had thousands of dead girls, dead women spread across it, they would stop the war sooner than if it was just men out there dying. And this sounds ridiculous, but people would
that
look
sounds
at that.
horrific.
People would look at this and they would find it to be far more disgusting, far more horrific, as you just indicated. Because the idea of a bunch of 18-year-old girls mangled and dead on a battlefield doesn't sit well in people's mind. So maybe the idea of ending wars is just for men not to fight them. If men are so great at it, let's take them away from it. If women are so shitty at it, let a bunch of women go fight, and then society will look at that and they will find that less tenable to agree to let continue.
No, I said
Ridiculous
that's
idea.
horrific. I said that's horrific because that would mean that the life of a man it's like more expendable than the
Oh,
life
that's been
of a
proven
woman.
time and time again.
I know, but which is something that I'm completely against.
Me too, as a
It's,
man.
I know, and me as a woman. So, because as you know, feminists, they are not fighting just for women's rights. They are fighting for all the rights of persons that are being violated. I mean, just to make a parenthesis here.
Hmm.
Uh, but, I mean, I'm someone who is against war. I don't know how to say it in English. Pacifist. Do you say it like this? Yeah,
Pacifist is somebody that doesn't believe
pacifist.
in
But
fighting. Yeah.
yes, so but wars exist. So
Yes.
this is a reality, and in this case where wars exist, I would be in favor of women and men fighting, not only men. So
Well, let's make a distinction. War
Yeah.
because some rich person wants to be richer, that's an immoral war. I know there's all types of
That's another thing. I'm not talking about that kind of war.
exactly. So you're likely talking about defense. The defense of your
Yeah.
nation is not the same thing as going to war. And the defense of your nation should be made up of a voluntary military. And going to war, that's we're being invaded, same thing. That's where the idea of conscription comes out.
Again, regarding the conscription of only men, it reminded me of something that I've been reading. I mentioned before that military or the army is considered as an area, as a domain that it's like reinforcing or where masculinity is built. But there is also this kind of we talk about the participation of women in the armed forces. We're not analyzing the participation of men in the armed forces because this is kind of a taken for granted. It's like naturalized. And I mean, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I'm kind of against it, of this idea to put biology and nature into the participation of men in the army. And that's why I said that, I'm against wars, but as long as they exist, I would like to see men, women, and all genders willing to participate in the armed forces, having the right to participate, and also to see why the participation of men or it's not being put in question at all. Like it's just, as I said, taken for granted. So this
Yeah.
really
So
bothers
it
me.
is it actually is accounted for. It's just like the expression, it's baked right in. It's part of the system. Just because you know there are so when you have a unit that's all men, it doesn't mean that every man is allowed to be in that unit. It means that they have particular screening processes and they've gone through them, and those are the men's and that they are actually in the service. I mean, it's built right in. Just because a woman is added to that mix and she is now judged or evaluated, that doesn't change. Everybody there is judged and evaluated. I mean, that argument seems like almost a straw man argument where there's nothing there. And back to
And
your
I
usage.
totally agree with it.
Well, I mean, I think usage of language, it says a lot. So when you say war or militaries and masculinity, and you include all those words in one general idea, I think it's a fallacy, because I mean, again, exaggerated example. If you have a woman who uses her womanly wiles to trick a man into X, Y, and Z, and then she kills him when he's put down his guard, do you call war feminine at that time? Just
I'm not
removing
going
the
in all.
word of masculinity is the first step in finding some type of equalization for genders.
No, masculinity, it's what we intend by masculinity. So, masculinity in the sense of being very strong, of being the protector, and of being soldier. It's like they go hand to hand. So, there is no,
That's what I'm saying.
if you
That
say,
needs to be broken.
yes, absolutely, this is what I'm saying too.
It sounded to me that you're using masculinity to
No,
earmark that only men should be in the military.
absolutely not. It's my English, sorry.
No, 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 no. You know that word just as well as you know femininity, so I don't want to hear that.
No, I'm saying about what we think about masculinity. So I'm not talking, I mean, I'm talking first of all as a sociological concept and also as with all the symbolical weight that it takes. And it's like equalized to soldier. And this I want to break.
Okay, thank you. I think you didn't finish that thought. You want to break. I agree. It should not be equalized to soldiers, because the idea itself means that only soldiers are men and only men can be soldiers. So, yeah, I entirely agree with that idea. So then we should stop using the word masculinity and just use people.
That
No,
would be really cool, but not for the society of today.
God. All right, well, I, as usual, didn't cover half the things I'd like to. But that's because this is a very complex and expanding topic.
And we focused only on the case of Ukraine and on the case of the forced conscription. Because
Yeah.
if we talk about women and men in the correct me if I'm wrong, military forces, armed forces, I don't know how to use the best. That would really be another specific, or maybe even two specific episodes.
Yeah, I know we didn't touch on the migration idea as much as I'd like to. The second refugee crisis of Europe, as it's starting to be called. We like you say, we'll cover that another time.
Yep.
All right. Well, it was fun talking today, Mira. Talk to you later.
Thank you.